I did that very much together. We went through the script and kind of, well, I guess at the beginning I tried to do it by myself, but then I made 10 stages and then they were very specific and it was just too much. So we sort of pared it down to 5 and then just went through the dialogue with Tony McNamara, our screenwriter, and figured out how, that it was all sort of tracking accurately. And then we worked on the walk and some physicality, and that was kind of it. And then we found things as we went, and we played around, and we had rehearsals, and I was with the other actors, and it kind of just went from there. Less exciting than it sounds. Did it sound exciting to me?
Great.
Yeah.
And Mark, I kind of love how you described that there was this balance in playing Duncan of feeling like you had one foot in a grave and one foot on a banana peel, because essentially you're playing to this very heightened humor, but we have to feel all of his emotional vulnerabilities as very real for the comedy to work and to feel connected to it. And I was interested in how you got the chance to really use the rehearsal period beforehand to discover that.
So we had 3 weeks of rehearsal, which is you just don't ever do in a movie, and we really just played theater games during that time. But I could see in the script that he crashes and burns, and the whole idea, I think, was to see how far we could take his puffing himself up and then his just totally deflating, and take those things to their extreme. I mean, I just kept feeling like, wow, we pushed it that far, maybe we could just go a little bit further until it breaks, until we've gone too far. But I just felt like you could never really go too far with him,
And you mentioned the kind of theater games that you would play during rehearsals. And so for both of you, I wanted to ask about what were some of the most beneficial exercises and games that Yorgos came up with, because it wasn't so much about just sitting and reading through scenes together.
None. I mean, none of them were beneficial in the sense of like getting into, the characters or plan out what we were gonna do or anything. What it was beneficial for, and I think the entire point of it, I don't think that is his point to those rehearsals, was getting really close to each other. And the actors felt really comfortable with each other and kind of intimate, and like we could embarrass ourselves and be free around each other. And I think that he achieved that. We did that.
We did that.
We did that. We did that.
Really free?
A little too.
Too free? No. Yeah, it was. We would do slow motion interpretive dances. We would do log rolling on the ground. We would do puppeting each other. We did a lot of really goofy. I mean, he just basically wanted us all to look like idiots with each other, so that we could never look more like idiots than we already had when we actually got to set.
And Mark, you also discovered the voice of your character during that rehearsal process in that period, and I was just interested in how you landed upon the vocal intonation of Duncan.
Well, I was working with our dialect coach, and I had kind of this idea of it, and I would try it. He's like, well, that's from a different period, but okay, let's go with that. And then I'd do another sound, and he's like, that reminds me of, an actor. That reminds me of Terry Thomas. And then I would do another thing. He'd be like, well, that's a totally different character altogether. And I was like, well, how do we know that he's English? Maybe he's just full of shit. And so this character just started to come out. And he was, there's an actor, Terry Thomas, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's like, ding dong. Hello. He's a famous cad. I mean, the cad in English cinema is just like a stock character of like the womanizer. But we took that one step further and just had him just totally lose his stuff.
And Emma, for you, I mean, in playing Bella Baxter, you're playing this character that's so unencumbered by a sense of self-awareness and by shame. And what was that experience of having to really find that in yourself in order to play her?
I also just realized that Mark edited himself from saying the word shit after you watched this movie. And it's like as if this isn't the audience for the word
I didn't
shit.
want to offend anybody.
It's a family audience here.
Sorry. Shit.
You did it!
Ah, so liberating. Oh my God.
Sorry, what was your question? I was harping on that in my mind after you tried to say stuff.
It was a worthwhile diversion.
Stuff until then.
Essentially, it was just in order to play a character that's so unencumbered by shame and self-awareness, what the experience was like of you and having to find that in yourself to play her.
It was the best part about playing her. It was the reason I fell in love with the character in the first place, and it was not easily doable as a grown person in society to think about the concept of never having learned any of that or had any of the sort of confines of what we all deal with on a daily basis put onto you, and so that was really the best part. It was like every single day I feel like I woke up and I was like, please just let me forget, like please let me just be brand new as much as I possibly can. And it was a really beautiful experience because of that. But you also kind of can't do that because there's like technical rules to making a film, and I don't fully become the character in every moment of the day. So there were definitely times, especially at the beginning, that I was very, very hard on myself and was really kind of freaking out about what was going on and was judging it too much. But as it went on, it became more and more freeing and more fun.
I mean,
you're a Scorpio, aren't you?
Hell yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Duh.
Dark.
what were those first?
So are you.
What?
So are you.
So am I. Takes one to know one. I'm really hard on myself, too.
He made that part up, by the way. Didn't you make that up?
When I hit my head.
Slamming your head.
Kind
It was a mistake.
Can you put a piece of foam here?
I'm just gonna smack
wanna
my
try
head as hard as
something.
possible on the bar top.
I mean, in playing Bella, what was that experience and that journey of the first few days on set? Because in order to do this performance, you have to take so many risks and you have to kind of trust yourself. You really have to trust your ghost. And this was a character that you had been working on and thinking about for 4 years by the time you started filming. And so what was that like the first few days when you finally are fully encompassing her?
Rough stuff. Yikes. It was not great the first couple of days. I trust Yorgos clearly so deeply. We've made 4 films together and I felt wonderful with him, although I didn't get to be with you that first week. We weren't together because we were shooting.
Which is why it was so rough.
That's why it was so rough. I didn't have my marquee. But the first week, because it was Bella at really at the beginning, playing piano, all of the things that are her most sort of primitive stage. It was just, she's all instincts, and at least for me, I don't know if you feel this way, but the first week or 2 of work is always brutal because you're really finding your sea legs and you don't really, it's like first day of school, like the first week of school at a new school. You're like, what do you feel great on day 1? But then what if someone recorded everything you did on day 1 of school and they were like, that's staying in the permanent record. It sucks. So you're just like,
we're gonna put that on the internet.
That's forever in this movie. It was tough the first week, but tough in what respect? Like, it's acting and it's a movie, so it's not that tough overall. Nobody died that I know of. Been
But-
caught by my actions.
But
On that first
Yorgos
week.
is also not the most effusive.
No, but I don't need that. I don't
I
really
do.
need. I know. I tried my best.
You were so good. That's why by the time I got to you, I was like, okay, I'm
Yeah,
okay.
I don't like a coddle. I don't like a
No.
wow, that was so great today. Like I don't. I just need you to tell me like what to change and what to work on. Kind of. I mean, it's nice to have someone say.
That's
like,
enough of that.
That's what he says when it's time to move on. And then I'm like, yes, that's enough of that.
And I'm like,
Got
that's
it.
enough.
He's like, what? I know it's tricky, but
That's a big compliment if he says, that's enough of that. Then you know
You nailed it.
you're in the pocket.
Yeah.
Well, didn't everyone, Mark, I think everyone played into your fears of getting fired on this movie by constantly joking that Oscar Isaac was being hired to replace you, to the point where Willem Dafoe actually had him come in one day onto set. So where did that joke start from, and what was that like when Oscar actually showed up on set for you?
Well, he showed up in rehearsals, not on set.
Yeah, we were in rehearsals, and we were probably like 3 weeks in, and it was a running joke that I was going to be replaced, and then of course Oscar was. I made a joke like, "Oh, Oscar would be great in this," and they were all like, "He would be." And then Oscar showed up and just happened to be in Hungary, in Budapest, and there's Oscar walking around the lot, and I'm thinking, that's a little close. And then one day, Willem brought him in, and Oscar walked up and he said, "Hey man, you did the best you could."
Willem made him do that.
Willem put him up to it. But at that point, I was like, we'll fight for it.
You figured out the voice by then. You were all in.
Yeah, I was like, I have the voice, you can't touch me. But I found out that Yorgos halfway through was like, what is he doing? Can this kid pull this off? Yorgos told me at dinner the other night, he turned to you and he said, does he know what he's doing?
You say that to me?
He didn't?
No.
He told that to me.
He's continuing the message.
He told me I was a terrible dancer too.
Well, he does think that.
But that's why, he's like, you're a terrible dancer, but that's why you're so good.
I mean,
How do you interpret that?
speaking of dancing, though, I mean, I love the sequence between the two of you with that dance. And, it's the classic Bella being completely unencumbered, Duncan thinking that he is, but never truly being, coming together. And so how much did the two of you want to choreograph in advance versus kind of leave some freedom to just discover that scene?
It was pretty much completely choreographed. And we started that in the rehearsal process with this woman, Constanza, who had done the dance, actually had choreographed the dance between Rachel Weisz and Joe Almond during The Favorite. And she's great. And we just sort of played around. I mean, it was like we tried moves and then...
Yeah, Yorgos would say, no, that's, what else can you do here?
Yeah.
And then we would try something.
Yeah, exactly. And then it kind of came together, and then we had like names for all of our dance steps, and then we practiced for a while, because that was at the beginning and that dance scene was near the end of the shoot. So when it finally came, there'd been a lot of build-up.
Yeah.
And it was fine.
Yeah.
It looked okay.
It was probably another minute longer.
Yeah, it was. He cut like half of the dance.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you didn't film the film entirely chronologically, but Emma, I feel like you got the chance, by the sounds of it, to film mostly chronologically in terms of Bella's journey. And then wasn't the final thing that you filmed the moment where the old version of her is jumping off the bridge? And so what was that moment on the last day of set, filming a scene where she's essentially being reborn into the world after spending so much time with her?
Heartbreaking. I was crying the whole morning that day, just because I was so sad to let the experience go and to let Bella go. And it was, I had been there for 4 months, and it was just, and it had been years and years of thinking about this. And so I was very heartbroken, and then we were gonna do this, moment where she throws herself from the bridge. Well, Victoria throws herself from the bridge, and I was really upset. I was like, this is so horribly depressing and brutal, and I can't believe we're ending like this after all this joy and exploration. And Haley, our first AD, who's like an angel, like you never meet a first AD like this. They're usually like really gruff and intense. And she's the opposite. And she said, you know what I realized? It's not the end. It's the beginning of Bella. It's the birth of Bella. And I was like, oh my God, it is. It is. Not to condone what Victoria does, but it really was a beautiful kind of ending to that, because it was, yeah.
And Mark, one of the things that's so fun about Duncan as a character on screen is the fact that he's kind of his own biggest advocate in the world and the first person to compliment himself, but you kind of get the sense that most of what he's saying is very untrue. When he's like, 100 women is a low number for the number of women I've bedded, and you're like, really? And so what was that like, kind of going through the script and kind of playing around with the idea of what he's saying about himself and where the truth of the character actually lies?
That was the truth. I mean, I do think he was quite the,
Sure,
You've
yeah.
been thrice.
Thrice smoked by the very best.
The very best.
Yeah. Classic line.
Well, I guess she had no way of telling, so he could say anything to her. But I think, I do think he's kind of a classic sort of misogynist, bon vivant. And I think he has had a lot of relationships, and I think he does sort of seriously consider himself what he is. But like all of those guys, there's usually just a deep insecurity in them. But what makes it so delicious is that he truly does believe that. He expects her to do what normally happens, which is they fall in love with him and he has to kick them to the curb. But the opposite happens. And so I think the more that we invest in believing that he has had all those experiences, the more devastating it is for him when he just really, for the first time, falls head over heels in love with her.
And it's amazing to watch the breakdown after he realizes that he's never going to be able to capture her heart in the way that he wants, and he's very much blaming her rather than having any sense of self-reflection. And so how did you find the extremes to, again, kind of going back to what you were saying about how far you could take the comedy, how far you could also take the tragedy of the character?
Well, there was a moment where he proposes to her on the ship, and she's basically like, I'm marrying somebody else, and he doesn't, and we were doing that scene over and over, and Yorgos came out and he said, why, just take your time, don't rush that. And in that big wide space of silence where he's trying to figure out what to do and say next, I think that's where we see him crumble and we actually begin to see a vulnerable side of him. And that note, I didn't know where we were going to go. We never talked about the character. We never talked about the script. I had the script, but I didn't know where it was going to go. I don't know how funny it was going to be or not funny it was going to be. And at that moment, I was like, okay, we're really going there emotionally, but let's push it out the way we've been doing everything else with it. Is that interesting at all?
No.
Good.
And lastly, for you, Emma.
She's taking care of me.
Lastly for you, Emma, you've constantly said that this is your favorite character that you've ever played in your career, and you've had so many phenomenal characters that you've gotten to build relationships with. What was it that was so different about this character and the way that you fell in love with her?
I feel like it's unfair that I've been saying that because I feel like the characters that I've gotten to play have been exactly right for exactly the time that I've gotten to play them. And if I hadn't gotten to have those experiences, I never would have gotten to Bella. So for this period in my life and where I was when I first heard about her and where I ultimately was when I played her, which is even more kind of apropos those 4 years later, it was an incredible time to learn and still remains an incredible time to think about what would you be if nobody told you what you were. You know that quote? It's really fascinating to get to live in those shoes for a little while and to look at all these experiences of life in kind of a new way. And if you didn't have these sort of labels on experiences of good or bad or ugly or beautiful, what would you see? And it's a really almost impossible thing to do unless you're like a Zen monk that's like living completely removed from society and living in meditation all the time. I mean, it's a really hard thing to do in modern day society, but that the ability to get to live in that and being asked to live in that on a daily basis was extremely beautiful and illuminating. And yeah, so that's why.
Yours was interesting.
So was yours. I was just being serious. Mark! Hell yeah!
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
I'm genuinely so in awe of both of your performances in this film, and every single time you rewatch the film, there's so much more to see in terms of the different layers that you've both brought to this. So congratulations on an incredible film, amazing performances, and thank you so much for sharing this with us tonight. Also, I'm so sorry to ask this, if we could just ask you guys to stay in your seats for 1 second. Emma and Mark have another event, another Q&A that we're trying to get them to really quickly. So if we could just ask you to stay seated just for 1 minute while we get them out, we hugely appreciate that. Thank you so much, everyone.